Blog Talk Radio.
Hello, everyone in the franchise world. My name is Paul Segreto, and this is Franchise Today, and I'm back full steam ahead. Got the oral surgery behind me. My co-host, Stan Friedman, who's with me live from Minneapolis, Minnesota, handled the helm for the last 2 weeks, and I really appreciate it. Stan, how are you?
Well, I'm doing great, Paul. I'm out in Minneapolis getting ready to participate in the Faegre Baker Daniels Annual Franchise Summit, which is kicking off right now as we do this. They are 13 floors below me here at the Radisson Blu in Minneapolis, kicking the program off, and it's going to be about 150 or 60 franchising professionals here for the next day and a half. And as is always the case with the Faegre Summit, a lot of ideas, a lot of interchange, a lot of passionate people, all here with the love of franchising. And with Brian Schnell as the orchestra leader, there'll be a lot of intellectual capital shared here, and probably a few beverages too.
Oh, I'm sure. And I got the vision in my mind of Brian standing up there, at the podium like a conductor, tapping his baton, putting his hands up and say, "Let's get going." I could definitely see that. But before we get to today's guest, because I know we're also have a lot to talk about today with our guest, Sam Haddock, who's got 40-plus years experience in the restaurant industry, so I'm anxious to talk to him. I wanted to touch base. We never really mentioned anything about IFA's Wednesday Wise webinars. So we have one coming up Wednesday, September 7th at 11:30 a.m. Central Time, titled "Be You the Mentor or the Protege? A Formal Mentorship Program is the Answer." And the moderator is Harvey Humsey, from Vice President of Franchise at at Express Services. Catherine Monson will be on, Clint Ellers, Barbara Moran Goodrich, Al Martin, and Celia Smith. Great franchise professionals. I highly recommend that you attend this event. Really great topics for the Wednesday Wise webinars. Really super stuff. I also want to, of course, remind everybody listen to all the Franchise Today shows of late, and you'll hear Stan, giving a lot of great information about upcoming events. There's this week the Faegre event, which if you're not there, obviously you're missing that. Next week, Franchise Capital Exchange, and then of course we lead into September, and many franchise professionals will be heading towards Washington D.C. And one thing that Stan was able to secure for us is an interview with Aziz Hashim, the chairman for the IFA, and we'll be doing a special edition, so you'll be seeing that come across your screen and social media in a lot of different places. So Stan and I are definitely looking forward to talking with Aziz ahead of the big events in Washington in September. Stan, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, just how hard it is for me to believe, Paul, that Aziz is already past the halfway point in his year as chairman. What a fast-paced year this has been, and I've been sharing that sentiment with almost everybody I've spoken with here earlier this morning. It's just amazing that it feels like this summit just happened a week or two ago. It's been a year, and now Aziz is coming around the last quarter on the racetrack for his term as chairman, and will be in September in no time, and he'll be passing that gavel along in just a few months. Hard to believe how fast time seems to be tracking, Paul.
It really is, and it's hard to believe that Robert Crisanti, who we were talking about earlier in the year, new to the program with the IFA as the CEO and president, has been in the seat and doing a great job. If you haven't seen it, in 1851 magazine, Nick Powell's No Limit Agencies digital magazine, there's a great interview. It says Crisanti outlines progress, challenges for franchising, talks about the Our Franchise campaign. I highly recommend you read that. And, of course, I also want to say, hats off to Nick and his team at No Limit. What a fantastic job he's done with the 1851 franchise project. I really look forward to getting it in my email on a weekly basis. They're really doing some great things, and I think that just lends stand to this new generation. Millennials coming into franchising and really taking their position for the future of franchising. That's great. And of course, if talking about the future of franchising, if you've not yet registered and under 35 years old and an entrepreneur with a franchise brand, look at the Next Gen program. You could find that on the IFA's website at franchise.org. They are taking nominations and applications for the Next Gen program. You have to be 21 to 35 years old, have a business that potentially can be expanded through franchising. I highly recommend you look at that or recommend it to somebody that fits the criteria. And, we talk about 40 years in franchising, Stan, and we're talking about, people 21 to 35 years old getting into Next Gen, and our guest 40 years and counting in the restaurant industry. Of course, that's Sam Haddock. Let me just preempt this by saying, Stan, Sam a while from our discussions. 40 years. And here's the who's who that I want to read. He has experience as a franchisee and franchisor, owning and operating restaurants such as Donato's Pizza, Moe's Southwest Grill, Rally's Hamburgers, Wendy's Hamburgers, and then serving as Director of Operations for Rally's, COO of Popeyes, Louisiana Kitchen, COO at Winters International, and Managing Partner and COO at Jake Christopher's Restaurants. Just a tremendous resume. Sam, welcome to Franchise Today.
Paul, thank you very much. It's great to be here this morning. Look forward to spending some time with you and Stan this morning. And man, you make me sound older than I am. But it's been. I started in '73 at Arby's in Winston-Salem, North Carolina, and I had no idea that would lead me down the road that I've been blessed to travel the last since then, and a lot of places, but mostly, a lot of people, a lot of great people in this industry. Both we're in the restaurants, the staffs, the managers, the executives. It's and just a lot of great people.
So Sam, maybe a good place to start would be at the beginning, and tell us what it was that got you into this business to begin with. And then we can advance the timeline forward because, I don't know you 40 years, but it just feels like 40 years maybe. But you and I go back to the 90s, me at Blimpie and you were at Winters International at that time, or RTM. And
that's right.
But how did it all start for you, Sam? What got you into this business to begin with?
Well, I'd like to tell you something very inspirational and how passionate I was about getting in the restaurant business, but it was quite accidental. I graduated from Wake Forest University in Winston-Salem in 1973, and I just wanted to hang around Winston-Salem for a couple of years with with some of my big-time college friends, and being single and not having much responsibility, that was going to be fine. My real career thought at that point was I'd go back to Eastern North Carolina, where I'm originally from, and probably teach. But as fate and fortune would have it, I took a job at Arby's Roast Beef Restaurants in Winston-Salem on Knollwood Street, and became assistant manager, a trainee, and then assistant manager, which started a 15-year career at Arby's, which I loved dearly. Met one of my best friends, Dick Holbrook, who some people probably familiar with. Dick was the manager of the Arby's I trained at in Winston-Salem starting October 15th, 1973. And I stayed in touch with Dick all the years. And flashing forward, what got me to Atlanta in 93, Dick and Frank Bellotti were, taking over the Popeyes and Church's business. And I reunited with Dick. They got me up to hooked up with Popeyes. So, again, great friendships in this business and the people But at Arby's, I'm assistant manager, and I got promoted to manager for a second store we opened, and I kind of got interested in it, loved the people aspect of the business, the systems and processes. I like to be fairly structured and organized, and we had that in spades, and ended up being a couple of years later district manager in Eastern North Carolina for the restaurants we opened. And one of the best learning experiences of my career. It's kind of rare. I got promoted to district manager, and then I opened up my restaurants. We opened up a restaurant a month for 5 months. So to say I learned a lot, and it was pedal to the metal is a huge understatement, and obviously I had a lot of help doing that. But there's no better learning experience in this business than opening restaurants. I mean, you see it all. You have to be organized. You have to hire people. You have to train people. You got to do the construction. The real estate, of course, comes up front. So, I mean, you talk about learning all aspects of the business on the operations side of it and the marketing side of it. That truly is a great experience. So, long story short, I ended up staying at Arby's for 15 years after I took that temporary job, and my last position at Arby's was director of company operations for Utah and Arizona, where we had 36 restaurants that we purchased back from existing franchisees.
And all in the blink of an eye, right, Sam? Doesn't that 15 years, kind of like I was saying to Paul a minute ago, doesn't it feel like only yesterday?
Man, I'll tell you, it's amazing. But I tell you, some of the stuff I learned, their systems and processes were awesome. I learned really to be heavily checklist oriented. I was there 15 years, and I don't care. Even when I was still a manager, I walked in that restaurant, the first thing every day was those checklists came out, and if you skipped an item on that checklist, I was very kindly reminding you that, look, I don't care if you've been here, how long you've been here. You check off every single item every single day in the sequence it's listed, and don't deviate. And I think that, it brings up in my mind the thought about, restaurant management and how it is a series of doing the same thing the same way every day if you're ever going to have the consistency you want, and you got to have that discipline. But you don't want a bunch of robots, and particularly you don't want your managers just in there, by rote telling people what to do. So to me, the real challenge of the management staff of a restaurant is breathing life and breathing passion and breathing energy into that building every day. Their job is to help motivate, lead, guide, and direct the other people to do what they do, doing the same details every day without it getting boring and rote and going through the motions. I mean, to me, that's their job.
I'm kind of glad to liken that checklist to, Delta pilot does the same thing day after day. Better do that checklist 15 or 20 or 25 years into his career. And it's no different. It is a matter of needing to be consistent in what you do and inspiring others to follow your leadership.
Well, a good friend of mine, I've heard him say it 1,000 times, the restaurant business is simple. It's a matter of doing 1,000 little details right every day. And that's right. But I tell you, the other things at Arby's I really learned was food cost controls and cost to prepare. We had to sit down every Monday morning. I had those 5 restaurants. I'd sit down every Monday morning, and we had to extend out 4 places to the right, 4 decimal places to the right on the ideal food cost. I mean, and that was all.
Wow.
You talk about the millennials and the systems and processes we have now. Of course, that was all by calculator. So you're sitting there doing that stuff, and I don't know a whole lot, but I can sit down and talk about food costs with anybody because of the process we had there at Arby's and having to calculate all that manually. Of course, it's computerized now and laid out, which is great because you can get the information so much quicker and more accurately. But understanding what's behind those numbers is still very important. But those days we were counting drink cups and fry bags at night to determine how many soft drinks you should have sold and how many French fries you should have sold. So it's come a long way. For
yeah,
sure.
But it's still a penny profit business.
Oh, no doubt.
Still a penny profit business.
I'm sorry.
So Sam, really, those same metrics that you're talking about, those very fundamental, points you're talking about, really transcend into any type of restaurant business, and I think that's exemplified by your background, fast casual, QSR, all the way up to full service dining. Is that correct?
Oh, look, absolutely. It was really fun, coming out of fast food to start off with, then getting into the fast casual. I got so lucky on the fast casual side. We got on the forefront of that. Paul, I was the first Moe's Southwest Grill franchisee in Atlanta back in 2001. And that was really at the very forefront of the whole fast casual movement. So our timing on that was excellent. And I thought the whole fast casual structure was such a step up in the way you could customize food and give the guests, what they want, the way they want it, really the quantity they wanted it in. To me, was just such a step forward from, most fast food, where to some extent some things are pre-made, although, I go back to Rally's and Wendy's, and they, you were making everything to order and customizing it there too. But the difference was you didn't have the guest standing right in front of you, being able to give you that real eyeball to eyeball feedback about how they wanted things. And I just thought that customization was one of the and continues to be one of the key successes to the fast casual segment of the industry. But yeah, the cost control stuff doesn't change. You still got to schedule as best you can by half hours. You still got to look at daily theoreticals and what are your key items and how much are you off, and then look at your ideal food cost in percent and how much am I off. But the ability to identify where you're off is so much easier today, I think, with the back of the house software they have developed now. But I will say this, and I was out of the business a couple of years, and then when Costa Vida came along, I'm back in it. But dollars, those pennies you talked about, Stan, they are more important and harder to get today than ever. As I've gotten back in and looked at rents and common area maintenance and all that stuff, it's and the whole movement with the labor front on the march towards $15 an hour minimum wage and those pressures. Dude, it's harder to make money now than it ever was.
But here you are doing it again, and here you are doing it still. And I want to, before we dive into Costa Vida and talk about your latest venture and the brand that you're developing down in Florida, I just want to take advantage of the depth and scope of the experience that you've brought to these 40 years in franchising, and give the audience through the eyes of somebody like you, Sam, who's been on almost every side of the business. I don't think you've been a supplier yet, but you've been franchisor, executive.
I did touch on that briefly. I was with the Arby's Construction Equipment Company selling equipment packages and construction services for a while. So I did get to touch on that, but not nearly to the extent I've done the other stuff.
Shut my mouth. I should have known.
Well,
you're good on that one,
Stan. But I just thought I'd throw that in for you.
But Sam, you've got depth of vision from the Z and the Zor side. You've got depth of vision from being an executive to on the franchisor side of the business to developing and operating multiple units. When you look at the span of your career, is there one part of this business that's easier to see as the result of having been on both sides of the equation? What kind of perspective or depth of perspective has that brought to you?
Yeah, well, Stan, I think you have to have been on both sides of the fence to truly understand the franchisee and franchisor relationship, and probably have to have been in multiple concepts also in those positions. When I was at Arby's, I worked for a franchisee, but it was strictly operations. My first venture with dealing directly with franchisees on the franchisor side of the fence was at Rally's Hamburgers, where I was director of franchise operations. And you find out pretty quickly when you come out of the operations world, you're pretty used to going in, and when you ask people to do things, they pretty much do it because they directly report to you. So you don't get, a whole lot of pushback most of the time. You find out pretty quickly franchisees certainly are still independent business people, And sometimes when you look at them and say jump, they kind of look at you and say, I don't think so. So you start dealing with that part of it. And you know, that is, but to me, that is truly the essence of franchising as you get to the franchisee-franchisor relationship. And there can be friction, but managed properly, that friction can really help move brands forward if you really can allow for healthy debates and discussions. Because you think about it, you know, you've got, on one hand, you've got everybody that should be pushing the same way and has the same aims and goals. But when you look at how franchisees make their money and you look at how franchisors make their money, the interests aren't always totally aligned, obviously. So, and then as you get into strong personalities, now I'll give you an example. If I could jump ahead a little bit to my winter's days when I came as a chief operating officer. And so we had a meeting up in Dayton, Ohio. I wanted to go out and meet most of the franchisees and, you know, get face-to-face with them. And sometimes as a franchisor, you're the hardest people to deal with are people that have been corporate folks, and then all of a sudden they're a franchisee because they know everything, right? So this gentleman comes up to me, and he kind of corners me a little bit, and he says, well, what are you going to teach me? You know, this was a Lee's Famous Recipe group, which is a fried chicken chain for those who may not know. So the guy corners me, and he says, well, what are you going to teach me about frying chicken? You know, in a kind of in a belligerent type way. Not real friendly. So I looked at him, I said, how long have you been in this business? He looked at me, he said, 12 years. I looked at him, I said, well, if you don't know how to fry chicken by now, you ought to quit. And he looked at me, he said, I think we're going to go on just fine. I said, me too. So, look, when you're on the franchisor side of the fence, people respect you, and this is also just true in operation. When you're on the franchisor side of the fence and you're dealing with franchisees, they're going to respect you for your knowledge of the business. And if you come in and you've done your homework and you know what you're talking about and you know your concept and you're truly trying to help franchisees improve their sales, improve their profit margins, improve how they operate, they'll respect you and work with you. You know, if you go in with the attitude, look, we know it all, just shut up and do it our way, there's going to be issues. And coming into Popeye's stand, I truly got to understand a different part of the franchisee-franchisor relationship. Because I went in there, I thought I was hired to be the chief operating officer. As it turns out, the first 2 years I was the chief collections officer. Because Popeye's had gone through a bankruptcy. So one of my early trips at Popeye's, I'm going out to a franchisee, one of the biggest franchisees in the system. He has 28 restaurants, and he's got a pretty significant delinquency on royalty fees. Because when Popeyes went through the bankruptcy piece, some of them thought, well, you know, we don't have to pay. They're in court. We don't have to pay these fees. Well, I had to show up and tell this guy, well, guess what? You got to make arrangements to pay us back these past royalties you owe. And I think he was sincerely shocked. He was kind of like, really? You think I have to do that? I said, yes, sir. I really think you have to do that. And he says, well, I don't think I am. I said, well, then I don't think you're going to be operated as a Popeyes franchisee. He said, I got 28 restaurants. I said, sir, if we don't get a deal here, you had 28 Popeyes restaurants. So.
Yeah. You know, I actually saw a franchisee get thrown in jail in a similar situation to that, where working for a franchisor that had gone into bankruptcy, and there were 3 franchisees that decided to stop paying their royalties. 2 of them put it into escrow. So when the federal judge said you need to pay the royalties, they were able to stroke a check. And the third one couldn't. He gave him 30 days. He couldn't come up with it. He put him in jail for contempt of court while his family rustled up the payment. So, yeah, that's some serious stuff.
Oh, and look, the last thing you want to do is have a situation as a franchisor where you have a franchise. We had a situation at Winters, and I won't go into too much detail on it, but we had an operator I went to see, and I went to his restaurants, and I mean, just, you know, dirty and sloppy and employed, I mean, bad health rating. So I went to see the guy in person. And he, the first thing he looks at me and says is, "Well, look, I got another site. I want to open another restaurant." So I looked at him and I said, "Sir, why in the world do you think I let you open another restaurant?" Well, we ended up, going to court to terminate the franchise agreement. So this is on the operations ground. And when financial defaults and financial terminations are one thing in the arena. That's pretty straightforward. When you're trying to terminate a franchisee for substandard operations, you really have to do your homework. You really have to be buttoned up. So, of course, he countersues, and he tried to file bankruptcy. Unfortunately, we got our suit in before he filed bankruptcy. That thing would have really been a mess. But and I thought at the end of the day the judge was going to continue to let him operate, but he didn't. He upheld the termination. So, but that's the most that's the most unfun part of the business there is.
Yeah.
You're tuned to Franchise Today. I'm Stan Friedman, along with Paul Segreto, and we're speaking today with Sam Haddock, serial entrepreneur, lifelong franchisee, franchisor, and as I learned today, once upon a time also a supplier. Franchise Today is brought to you by FRM Solutions, offering best-in-class CRM and document management software designed specifically for managing franchise relationships. Built in industry-leading Microsoft Dynamics CRM, FRM Solutions are both cloud-based and fully accessible from right inside the Outlook inbox. With FRM, you'll spend more time focused on growing your business while your systems are effectively managed, such as workflows and collaborative communication with your prospective and existing franchisees. Sort, report, and dashboard all of your vital data and empower your teams to accelerate franchise sales, streamline store openings, and better field operations. Unit-level performance and compliance are all part of the package right out of the box. No hassles, no long-term contracts, no excuses, just solutions. FRM Solutions, found at frmsolutions.com. Franchise Today also brought to you by the Franchise Foundry, boasting more than 30 years of experience helping emerging brands bring sustainable growth to their franchise concepts. Franchise Foundry utilizes a hybrid approach, combined coaching and consultation to foster effective solutions for their clients. From general operational and change management to traditional and digital marketing, relationship and business management, and, of course, franchise recruitment and development. Let the Franchise Foundry assist you with scaling your brand, raising capital, and even with the exploration of mergers and acquisitions. You can learn more about Paul Segreto's Franchise Foundry and their expanding list of clients at www.franchisefoundry.com. So, Sam, we talked a little bit, we talked a lot, actually, about you and 40 years of what brought you to where you are today. And let's get into the brand that you're developing today and learn a little bit more about what you're doing with Costa Vida and how, well, with Moe's, I mean, you were the ultimate early bird, right? You were the first guy in.
Yeah.
You're not quite that early here, but you still are a pretty early adapter to this brand. Why don't you tell us a little bit more about it?
Well, Costa Vida, I think they have like 85, they've opened a few restaurants recently, so I think they've got 85 restaurants in all now. But the concept really is about the food, and I know everybody says that, but this is really done well. The food is all fresh. It's made from scratch in the back of the kitchen every day. And if this was just like Moe's and Chipotle, Stan, I wouldn't have got into it because I think that field's too crowded already. The competition's too tough, and even with the difficulties Chipotle has had lately, they're certainly still far and away the 800-pound gorilla. But the food here, I'll give you a sample. The tortillas are made fresh from scratch every single day, and then they are heated on what they call a cabal, which is a round spinning unit with a hot top on it. So that tortilla blisters up a little bit, bubbles up a little bit. If you take one of those tortillas straight off that cabal and eat it just by itself, it's absolutely amazing. So you won't see tortillas coming out of a bag at Costa Vida. So I think that's a nice advantage right there. And the flavor profile at Costa Vida is more fruits and vegetable marinades. Unlike most of the fast casual concepts, are more Sonoran in nature, which is salt and peppers. So the flavor profiles are certainly a little different, little sweeter, probably. As a matter of fact, and this shocked me, the biggest selling protein they have is a sweet pork. And the biggest selling single item is a sweet pork salad. And look, being from eastern North Carolina, I'm certainly biased when it comes to barbecue sauces, and I'm a vinegar-based guy. But I got to tell you, this sweet pork product is excellent. It's very flavorful. My wife and my daughter both absolutely love it. So it's kind of different for a pork product to be your leading item on the menu from a protein standpoint. But it's very good. And the products are more of it's a knife and fork burrito. It's not a pick up and eat with your hand burrito. Burritos are topped off. They're smothered with one of our signature sauces, which we have a roasted green chili and a tomatillo cilantro, a red enchilada, all made from scratch. So it's topped off with a sauce and a cheese. And then the other difference is the food at Costa Vida goes through anything that's supposed to be hot, goes through a little impinger oven at the end of the process. So the cheese gets melted down, and then everything's pretty much a platter. We top it off with beans and rice or salsa and guacamole at the end, depending on which item you get. And the menu is a little more varied. We have enchiladas also on the menu, which is certainly different than most of the other guys. So the taste and the variety, I think, are outstanding at Costa Vida.
Wow, I felt like I was watching the Food Channel right now. You explained that so greatly. And, when you said, let me give you a sample, I was waiting for that tortilla to come across in front of me. You
hey,
definitely
Paul,
got me.
I can't wait to have you. I can't wait to have you come over to Gainesville for our opening.
I would love to. It sounds absolutely fantastic. So, from a consumer perspective, is this counter service, and then they take it back to their table? Is it counter service that they picked it up right there? How does that work?
Yeah, it is counter service. Again, it's similar to Moe's in that aspect. You go down, you make it, you pay for it, and you sit down. Although if you have a large family, or if we have an item that's going to take a little longer, we may give you a number and have you go sit down, and we'll bring it to you. So as not to hold up the line and not have you have to stand there twiddling your thumbs while we're making your food. So from that standpoint, it's pretty, set up where you can customize it and customer can have what they want. So.
And what is the real
casual.
estate? Okay, and what does the real estate footprint look like?
It's about ideal, I guess, is 3,200 square foot. Our first restaurant is 33. More kitchen. You got to have a little more space because the kitchen really takes up 40 to 50% of the restaurant. It is a full service. It's a full service kitchen. When I say that, having come out of J. Christopher's in the full service business, we actually have more equipment in the back of this restaurant than we did at J. Christopher's. We do everything from scratch, and then we have an interesting concept, a deoxygenated process to where everything we prepare is vacuum sealed. So if it doesn't go straight on the line, it goes into a cooler, vacuum sealed to obviously maintain the freshness and help help the flavors kind of blend and marinate a little bit more while you're holding it. We've only got 2 cans in the whole kitchen. We have evaporated milk and condensed milk to help us make our fresh tres leches dessert. But other than that, there's no cans in the kitchen at all.
Wow.
And I think from a customer standpoint, a couple of other things they'd probably like to know is that although we can't claim to be GMO free because everything's not labeled, so you don't know. But I think we're safe in saying we're probably 98% GMO free in the kitchen. Another thing that plays in our favor from a purchasing standpoint, and I think sometimes people forget how important the purchasing aspect is, particularly as you're starting out a new concept and trying to grow a concept. And it's important for several pretty obvious reasons, I think. One is from a costing standpoint, where our chef, Jeff Alter, Jeff used to be at Cisco. So he knows what goes on behind the curtain. He knows where the money is, so he can kind of help monitor that and make sure we get the best prices and getting the right products into the distribution and stocked properly. The other thing is he is really great at sourcing. What Jeff tells me, he says, look, we always know where the products come from, where they were produced and by whom. He'll tell you that the vendor recall system is the best in the industry. And for example, they have 100% traceability in produce that allows them to know the exact row where the lettuce was picked. Wow. So after Chipotle, I think that's very important that you can go back and, that shed a whole new light on this whole traceability of product and where it comes from and being able to go back and track it. So Costa Vida is clearly at the forefront with Jeff's help in that aspect of the business. And then I think also importantly from a cost standpoint, there's not a lot of proprietary items. And for people who may not be in the business and don't understand why that's so important, I'll give you an example. Back in my Moe's days, when Moe's was growing, and initially being in Atlanta, look, our food costs were very good. So I thought everything was pretty good. I had a franchisee from Wisconsin call me and say, Sam, my food cost is eating me alive. I said, well, what's it running? He said, 35%. I said, how in the world can your food cost be running 35%? I was running 28% total cost of goods. So I said, well, look, you got some serious control issues. But then he sent me I said, well, send me your purchasing guide. And guys, his costs were 25, 30% higher than mine on proprietary, because we had some proprietary items. So, I think that gets overlooked sometime. But from that standpoint, our executive chef, Jeff Alter, both from a purchasing and a food development and flavor profiles and all that stuff, they've really got an ace in Jeff. He does a great job on both fronts.
So a lot of times, Stan, are you there?
Did we lose Stan?
No, you'll never lose me. You'll never lose me.
Stan got tired of hearing me talk already.
I put me on mute. Can't control you, Sam. I had to put me on mute.
That's good.
Sam,
that's good.
listening to you talk is such a different conversation than is had when you're talking to somebody who's owning and operating their first of what may become an empire like yours. But, a single unit operator, the conversation with an operator is clearly on a different channel than a conversation with you. You're talking a lot about executive chefs and about the corporate assets. What about your team, Sam? What does it take to build a team and drop them in and parachute them in? You were telling me earlier in the week about somebody who you brought down to Florida. Having the resource pool available to be able to have the right people and put them in the right seats. How big a team are you going to be with a 10-store operation, and what would you be doing most of the time in that organization? What's your role?
Well, I'll start out with the team. So far, we've been blessed. A gentleman by the name of Brad Slaughter, experienced operations guy. Brad was our operating partner up in Alabama for our Moe's operations for the last 5 years. I was involved in that. So we were able to convince / entice Brad to relocate down to Florida to be our operating partner. So, and look, when you're starting out from scratch, you don't know what you don't know. Man, it's tough. It's tough when you got rookies opening up that first restaurant for you. There's a lot, so many details, and so much goes into it. So again, we're blessed to have Brad. And Brad, and we made an investment in Brad's training because we think, look, Brad's going to be the leader of the operations team. So as opposed to 6 weeks, we actually had Brad out in Salt Lake in training for 2 months. So we wanted to make sure that he really grasped the concept and can describe it, teach it, lead it, and do the things that he needs to do. And then Brad had since assembled, and I've helped him out a little bit with this, but it's been mostly Brad. We hired a general manager who lived in Gainesville. We thought that was very important to, since our first restaurant's in Gainesville, to have someone who knows the town, who has connections, who loves the town. The bonus is, he's a University of Florida graduate, and he has ties in to the university there. So that's good. And then actually Brad had a couple of gentlemen that he worked with in Birmingham, that were both single and trying, looking for a career in the business. So we relocated 2 gentlemen that Brad has experience with. So fortunately for us, our first team opening up the first restaurant has a lot of experience. They know each other. There should be good chemistry and compatibility. And that chemistry between people is a funny thing. And when you have all new people, you don't know how that's going to work out. But fortunately, in our case, we've got 3 guys that work together, and Chris, our general manager, seems to be blending in very nicely and taking the leadership role that he needs to take. So I feel fortunate on the initial team we got. Going forward, Brad will be the operating partner. I guess I should give you a little background about. We have a 10-store development agreement with Costa Vida that goes from Gainesville, Florida, down to Sarasota. So Brad will have operational responsibility for the whole territory. But I foresee us going forward probably having 2 district managers. One will be probably located up in the northern area. Both of them may be located out of Tampa, but we're going to have 2 guys, so we can get to the restaurants on a regular basis that'll report to Brad. And then we're lucky on the admin standpoint, financial standpoint, one of the partners, Will Robinson, and Will's the gentleman who actually got me involved in this venture. Will was our CPA and accountant at Moe's, and he called me, asked me to get involved in this. But Will's going to handle all the CPA, all the admin stuff, so the operations team won't have to worry about that, and we can focus on operating restaurants.
Some people don't realize it, Sam, but when you're an operator of a 10-restaurant chain, or you're operating multi-flagged and multi-unit businesses, franchisees can often have organizations that are larger than the franchisors whose flags they're flying.
Yep.
Yeah. Well, it is interesting, Sam, because, you get so many concepts now that want to do 1 or 2 restaurants, and then by golly, I'm franchising this thing. And look, to me, that's a tough model. One thing I did learn from Rally's and Jim Patterson, who started that, it's one thing to go into the franchise, be a franchisor and say, I hope we're going to be successful. It's another thing to say, we're going to be a franchisor and we are going to be successful and put the infrastructure in and grow into the infrastructure versus getting out. Your concept becomes hot, but you're chasing your tail because you haven't put the infrastructure in of the operations team and the franchise consultants and the marketing piece and all that stuff. So you really need to be ahead of the game. But from our standpoint, like I said, we've got a good ops team lined up. We'll have a marketing consultant. We'll do some outsourcing. We're outsourcing the payroll and the HR piece of it to a group, MBA, out of Tampa, that we've got experience with, that does a great job. So some of those things that can be difficult to manage, we've outsourced. But between all that, we should be in good shape, I think, to manage all aspects of the business going forward. And certainly with Brad coming on up front, I think we're ahead of that infrastructure from an operations point that we talked about. And
what's
in
the
my
timeline?
role, you asked, our first restaurant will open. We're scheduled right now for the 12th of September. Hopefully, start training on the 5th. So we're getting close to that first one, and I must say it's been a challenge. I looked for real estate for a year and a half before we found our first before we found our first site. So
wow.
It's some challenging times out there. But, the
and
first
time
one,
for a 10-store schedule.
I'm sorry?
With a 10-store schedule, what kind of a timeline does that put you on for store 1 to store 10?
According to the development agreement, I think we had 6 years or 7 years to build out the market. But I'll say this, Costa Vida's been very good about understanding that, look, it's tough out there. It's more important to get the sites right than it is just to open up restaurants.
Right.
Their gentleman, Terry Jennings, is their head development guy. Terry's very experienced. He has a lot of background at McDonald's, Five Guys up in Canada. He's done a lot of stuff. So he knows the business. He knows it well, and he's a real asset to those guys and to us.
So, Sam, as you were saying, about it's tough times out there, and as we lead into the last part of the show, I do want to discuss, the tough times are out there. You hear about, last week, Logan's filed for bankruptcy. You hear about Ruby Tuesdays. I've heard anywhere between 65 and 100 locations closing. Of course, we got all the stuff going on with the NLRB. You have some things that directly affect you with the increased minimum wage and overtime law taking effect. How does this all play for you and your team and in projecting out, especially over 10 locations, that you probably went ahead and agreed to those 10 locations, prior to some of this stuff happening? And, of course, there might have been some other things, prior to that. So how does that fit into your decision-making moving forward?
Well, Paul, there's still basics in this business, and you have to follow them, I think, if you're going to be successful. So I think you have to do your homework more. You've got to be more cautious with the real estate. And I'm fortunate to have, the investors in this are understanding of that. And look, they've been up front and said, look, if you need to pay a couple of dollars more to get in the right location, then we got to pay a couple of dollars more to be in the right location. But certainly anybody in the restaurant business knows it's location, location, location. We are fighting the same challenges that everybody else is going to fight. So although it may be a more difficult playing field, it's still a level playing field. And I think you still have to go out. One, you have to have a concept that can be successful, and the unit level economics, are competitive, which Costa Vida has. We've got a good real estate company doing the real estate for us and doing the homework. And then you got to put your best foot forward again on the ops team, because ultimately it's going to come down to still taking care of customers better than the next guy, serving food better than the next guy. And that's where all that discipline and all that homework and all the systems and processes come in. And, again, breathing life into the concept and making it exciting, not only for your customers but for your employees.
I find it intriguing, Sam, that you're not – I mean, Paul, that was a great question, and I don't think I hear an ounce of trepidation in Sam's voice. As so many ask us all the time, what is the impact of all this legislation and regulation that government has been foisting upon the franchising industry for the last few years now? It's been like a nonstop barrage. And yet, here's Sam Haddock, who's been at this for 40-plus years, not even blinking about signing on to a 10-store, multi-store, 6-year agreement, with full confidence that he can get it done. Hats off to you, Sam.
Well, Stan, I appreciate that. Look, there's always anxiety. I mean, I would never make light of the fact, particularly you're opening up your first restaurant in a new concept. Yeah, there's always anxiety. You have second doubts, but I still think you got to focus on what it is you have to do to be successful, and not let the other stuff get to you. And look, and let's be real, because it's not just about but any concept, any franchisee. You sign a 2-store development agreement. I mean, look, if the first couple don't do well, you're not going to build out the agreement. That's just real world the way it is. Now, we're very confident in the concept. We're very confident in our ability to get good sites, albeit probably not as quickly as we'd like to, and paying more than we want to. And we're confident in our ability to operate them. Now, at that point in time, you're out on the open market competing with everybody else. So at that point, there's no need to be bashful about it. At that point, you just got to go after it and do the best you can, see what happens. But I'm confident in our ability to do what we can do. Now, hopefully, the concept will be well received in this part of the country because it's honestly unproven here. But we think the concept has enough strong attributes that if we do our part and operate the way we're supposed to operate, and do some of the smart marketing we need to do, then I think we'll be fine.
Sam, Costa Vida is very, very fortunate, very, very lucky to have a guy like you developing that new territory for them on the west coast of Florida. And I'm confident, Sam, that in our audience, we've got franchisors of other brands who are going to be real anxious to have a conversation with a guy like you, whether it's to ask you whether you're interested in their brands or whether it's to help them find more guys like you. How do people find you in the little bit of time we've got left?
How do people find me?
Yep. If want to give a web address or an email address or a phone number or something to help people find you.
The best way to reach me is email is fine. It's Sam Haddock, followed by the number 1, all small caps, and that's SAMHADDOCK 1@me.com. And if anybody wants to reach out on the phone, it's 404-550-2983. Always interested in talking to people in the business or people thinking about getting into business.
Well, Sam, you've made a lot of people happy to be able to hear from you today. And as always, you're just a very caring and sharing guy who's given up some great intellectual capital and some life experience to our audience. And on behalf of Paul and myself, I want to thank you for joining us today.
Hey, I want to thank you guys for having me. It's been a lot of fun, and I'm going to go back and look at some of the other podcasts now.
There you go. Share them with others. Share them with others.
Hey, you guys
Sam.
do a great job. Everybody appreciates you. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Sam. Well, Stan, you got to get going. Your presentation at the Faegre event. I do want to thank last week's guest on Franchise Today, Alan Young, the founder and CEO of Noble Brands, was last week's guest. And then next week, we'll be on same time, same station with Tom Lindbergh and Jeffrey Gill with Sir Grout Franchising. So until then, my name is Paul Segreto, wishing you the best, the very best in this great, great thing we call franchising. And Franchise Today is out.
When you're part of a military family, you understand sacrifice and support. So at American Public University, we honor your dedication by extending our military tuition savings to your extended family. Parents, spouses, legal partners, siblings, and dependents all qualify for APU's preferred military rate of just $250 per credit hour for undergraduate and master's level programs. American Public University. Value for the whole family. Learn more at apu.apus.edu/military.